Let's talk about the difference between the public realm and the private realm of doing business, and ultimately the difference between public business entities and private business entities. So there's a lot of confusion around this, and this is the basic, baseline of understanding in order to create a trust. And people get this wrong because it's not an easy, quick Google search where you can see, oh, what's the difference between public and private? It's very tricky actually to find, real answers on what that distinction is. And it's actually a lot simpler than most people think. So really, at its core, what a public business entity means is that it is jurisdictioned under the US government. That's all that it means. So anything that the US government controls is public in nature, whereas anything that they don't control is private in nature. So the real question is, how do you form a business entity that the US government didn't create and they don't control? That's the real question that you have to ask yourself as you're entering this world of the private realm. So what we do know is when it comes to LLCs, S corps, your person, your stream, you know, really most trusts, 99% of trusts out there, they're all public statutory entities. And how you know they're public and statutory is, you know, if you have to use a public agent to maintain it, like a lawyer or an accountant, depending on how you applied for it, typically you automatically get registered with a state because it's public in nature, and you have to file all kinds of forms and applications and do all sorts of things just to even open the entity. And then when it comes to the maintenance of that entity, well, are these tax exempt entities? Typically not. You're filing taxes, you're filing forms every single year. Even nonprofits, most nonprofits have to file every year to prove that status. And therefore, these are publicly jurisdictioned nonprofits. So the question is, when it comes to the private realm of doing business, we need to use a business contract that the government did create, very simply. And so, as you search out there and search for, different types of contracts, most of them, again, it's like lawyers and accountants have their hands in it, and it's very, very tricky to find a solid contract that has a proven track record of working, and the government did create it. And with our trust that we use from Liberty Aid Academy, you can learn more about that in our community linked below. That trust has been used thousands of times. It was created privately. And when you actually create it for yourself, meaning you take the template and you finish it off with the right information, and then you implement it with the right knowledge behind it, all of that process is done privately in the sense that the government had nothing to do with it. You can completely create that contract, notarize it, and then start to execute on that without the IRS or without the government even knowing that you did anything. And that's part of how you know that was truly a private contract. People mistake the word private for thinking it has to be secret, but it has nothing to do with that. If you have a privately written contract, it's actually beneficial in many cases to have other parties, see what that contract is if it's beneficial to you. So like if you have a counterparty that wants to see what your trust is or what is in your documentation, and it benefits you to do business with that counterparty, then fair enough. Show them your private trust documents, and that's great. It doesn't have to be a secret. It's private because you created it privately, and that is really the key distinction. So, I see people jumping through all these hoops with the newest, latest tax bill and the newest tax break, and I've heard this one is big and beautiful, although really it just is a load of BS. And anyone who's thinking about those things and jumping through all those hoops every single time the federal government or the state government makes a new rule, that's how also very clearly you're in the public jurisdiction. You've put your assets in a place where now you got to do all these little calculations and jump through all these hoops because now the rules changed. And guess what? The rules are going to change next year, and they're going to keep changing till the end of this time. And if you want to be in that paradigm, that is the public paradigm. It's just, it's so exhausting to keep up with what the machinations of the devil are doing to pull their strings and dance their little slaves in the matrix. Whereas if we start to remove ourselves and work on our own consciousness where we're not operating in that paradigm, then now we can start to fully move private. And that's not just, signing a piece of paper. Because I see a lot of people that say to me, oh, well, the contract is the most important thing. And if I have that contract, then I'm great. But it's absolutely not true. Because I see many people who have the contract and they don't do jack shit with it. Because it's just, they get confused or they get overwhelmed. And so it's not just signing a piece of paper. It's the implementation of it. And it's in that implementation, and by taking that action, your consciousness actually changes and makes you act in a different way. And you're acting like someone who is a private person who is under God versus a public citizen of the Matrix. And those two different people, they may have the same assets, but they're going to act in different ways, and they're going to protect those assets in different ways. And so this process is all about understanding that difference on an intellectual level, but then implementing it. And that's really the key where we excel in our community versus a lot of the other people out there who are just talking about, all this exclusive equity and blah, 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 blah. Where's the action behind it? Where's the proof? What have you protected? And how does it work repeatedly every single time? That's what we've done. And so I look forward to seeing many of you in our community where you can learn the fundamental distinction between public and private and stop worrying about the big, beautiful BS of the US government. And for the rest of you, good luck dancing to the tune of the devil.